She stood in that doorway with her arms crossed, looking right at me, looking right at my baby, right at Lily, screaming against my chest, her little body burning up with fever through her soaked onesie, her tiny fists grabbing at nothing because that is what sick babies do when they cannot understand why the world feels so wrong. And my mother looked at both of us, standing there in the freezing January sleet, and she said 4 words I will spend the rest of my life hearing in the back of my head like a song I cannot get rid of. You made your choices. Then she stepped back, and she closed the door. The porch light clicked off. I stood there soaking wet, shoes full of ice water, diaper bag sliding off one shoulder, holding my 8-month-old daughter with both arms and every piece of strength I had left, and for about 4 full seconds my brain completely stopped working. I could not process it. I could not make it make sense. My own mother had just locked me and a sick infant out of her house in 28-degree weather with sleet coming sideways off the street, and she had done it without blinking, without hesitating, without a single visible flicker of doubt. And I need you to stay with me. Because what happened 90 seconds later on that porch changed the entire direction of this story. And what I did in the months that followed destroyed everything my mother Patricia spent 30 years carefully building. The lake house she had been fantasizing about for 15 years. The money she had quietly stolen from a grieving widow who could barely get out of bed in the morning. The reputation she had polished inside her community like a trophy. Her credibility. Her relationships. Her sense of total and permanent immunity from consequences. All of it. Every last piece. Gone. Hit subscribe right now if you have never done it before, because this is the kind of story that will change the way you look at the people sitting at your own dinner table. And we are starting right now. I am not going to take you back 5 years. I am not going to give you a slow, gentle explanation of what kind of mother Patricia Holt was when I was growing up, even though I could fill a very long book with that and every chapter would make your jaw drop. What you need to know, and what you need to know right now, is this. My husband Jake died in October. Drunk driver. He was on his way home from a 24-hour pharmacy because I had come down with a bad cold and he wanted to pick up cold medicine before the baby woke up for her 3 a.m. feeding. Lily was 2 months old. She was asleep in her crib when the hospital called. And I answered the phone sitting on the bathroom floor because I had been up with her since midnight and I was too tired to walk back to the bedroom. I do not remember most of what the nurse said. I remember the word vehicle. I remember the word impact. And I remember sitting there on that cold bathroom tile trying to understand how the man who had rubbed my swollen feet every single night of my 3rd trimester, who had learned 3 different swaddle techniques from YouTube videos at 11 p.m. because he wanted to be ready, who had cried when Lily grabbed his finger for the first time like it was the most significant thing that had ever happened to him, was gone. Just gone. Because somebody decided to drive drunk on a Tuesday night. My mother arrived at the hospital 45 minutes after I called her. She walked in, looked at me across that waiting room, and said, "Well, you're going to need help." She was not wrong about that. She was the only close family I had left in the state. My father had left when I was 11 years old, and I had not seen him in years. Jake's parents, Walter and Diane, were in their 80s and living in Arizona, and they were barely managing their own health by that point. My younger sister Donna lived 20 minutes from Mom's house, and when I got back to my mother's place that night, Donna was already there. She and Mom were sitting at the kitchen table with something on a laptop, having what looked like a very focused, very serious conversation that stopped the second I walked through the door. They both looked up. Their expressions shifted so fast I almost didn't catch it. 1 second it was calculating and deliberate. The next second it was soft and sympathetic and all concern. I should have paid more attention to that shift. I should have asked what they were looking at. But I was carrying a 2-month-old baby in a car seat and a grief so heavy it felt like a physical weight on every single part of my body. So I sat down at my dead husband's kitchen table in the house I grew up in, and I took the tea my mother set in front of me, and I let her start talking about the plan. Patricia always had a plan. That is one thing about her that has always been true. She is organized. She is focused. And she has never in her life let an opportunity pass her by. I just had never understood until that night exactly what that meant about her. Jake had 2 life insurance policies. You need to know this. The first was through his employer, a solid $175,000 group life policy that named me as the primary beneficiary. He had updated it 3 days after Lily was born. I know this because I was lying in a hospital bed still attached to an IV, and he sat beside me and showed me the paperwork on his phone. He was so proud of himself for doing it so fast. "For our girls," he said. He said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. The second policy was an older personal policy, worth $85,000, that he had taken out before we even met. The beneficiary on that one was his mother, Diane. We had always meant to update it. We had always said we would get to it. We ran out of time. In the immediate weeks after Jake died, there was a mountain of paperwork. A mountain of phone calls and forms and decisions that needed to be made while I was operating on 3 hours of sleep a night and barely keeping Lily fed. My mother volunteered to help manage things until I got my feet under me. Those were her exact words. "Just until you get your feet under you, sweetheart." She took over sorting the mail. She answered emails. She helped me sign forms she had already reviewed, handing them to me one at a time with little color-coded sticky notes that just said, "Sign here," because she said she did not want to overwhelm me with details I was not ready to process. I trusted her. That is the sentence I will spend a very long time thinking about. I trusted her, and I signed things I did not read because she was my mother, and I was drowning, and the alternative— the idea that the woman who gave birth to me was systematically positioning herself to take advantage of my husband's death while I sat in her house nursing a fatherless baby was something my brain simply refused to build into a complete thought. So I signed, and I cried, and I fed Lily, and I cried some more, and my mother managed things. What I did not know, not yet, was that she had called the insurance company 3 separate times in November, not on my behalf. On her own. What I did not know was that she had a document she was calling a power of attorney, and that she had been presenting herself to financial institutions as my legal representative. And what I absolutely could not have imagined, sitting at that kitchen table drinking tea in my grief, was what she had done when a check for $175,000 arrived in the mail addressed to me. Because when I asked her about the insurance claim in December, she said it had not been processed yet. "These things take months," she said. "The company is backed up. You know how insurance companies are." When I asked again a week later, she told me I was making myself more anxious by fixating on it. When I asked a third time, she got that particular look on her face, the one I had been seeing my entire life, the one that said I was being difficult and irrational and that she was a saint for putting up with me. "Emma, stop. I am handling it." I stopped asking. It was my Aunt Renee who cracked everything open. Renee is my mother's older sister. They have not spoken in 11 years because of what my mother always described as money issues, which I had always assumed was just the kind of vague, dramatic falling out that middle-aged sisters have about nothing in particular. I had not thought much about it. Renee called me out of nowhere in the middle of December. She said she had heard about Jake from a cousin. She said she was so sorry. We talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular, just condolences, just the quiet things people say when they do not know what else to say. And then at the end of the call, right before she was about to say goodbye, she paused. And she said, very carefully, very precisely, "Emma, how are you managing with the financial side of things? Your mom helping you get that insurance sorted out?" I said yes, she was helping. There was a silence on the line. Not a long one, maybe 3 seconds. And then Renee said, "You might want to make sure you're the one talking to the insurance company directly, sweetheart. Might want to check on that yourself." She didn't explain. She just said, "Merry Christmas," and hung up. I lay awake that night for 4 hours. I stared at the ceiling of my childhood bedroom with Lily asleep in the bassinet beside me, and I replayed every sticky note. Every form, every sign here, the company is backed up. Every time I had asked and been redirected and distracted and made to feel like asking was itself the problem. At 2 a.m., I got up and I checked my email for any communication from the insurance company that I might have missed. There was nothing. Because my mother had been managing my email. The next morning, I called the insurance company myself, the first time I had ever called them directly. I waited on hold for 16 minutes. The woman who answered was professional and efficient, and after I verified my identity, she pulled up the claim and said, without any hesitation at all, "Yes, Ms. Calloway, that claim was processed and a check was issued in November." I said, "To me?" She said, "The check was issued to Emma Calloway as named beneficiary, yes." I said, "Can you tell me if it was cashed?" There was a brief pause. "I can see that the check was endorsed and deposited on November 14th. November 14th. I was at the pediatrician's office on November 14th. Lily had her 2-month checkup. I sat in a waiting room with pastel wallpaper asking Dr. Marin about colic while my mother was at her house depositing my dead husband's life insurance check. I thanked the woman. I hung up. I sat in the kitchen of my childhood home, the same kitchen where I had eaten cereal and watched Saturday morning cartoons, the same kitchen where my mother had made birthday cakes and Christmas dinners and all the ordinary rituals of a regular family life, and I tried to understand what I was hearing. My mother cashed my check. She deposited $175,000 of Jake's life insurance money, and she had never said one word. I found Donna in the living room with her phone. I asked her calmly whether she knew anything about the insurance check. She didn't flinch. She didn't stumble. She looked up from her phone with exactly the expression someone has when they have already prepared for this conversation. "Mom's been taking care of everything," she said. "You need to let her handle it." "Donna, that check was made out to me. It was my husband's life insurance. My name was on it." She shrugged. She actually shrugged. "You would have spent it on something impulsive. You've never been good with money, Emma. Mom's protecting you." I stared at her. "Where is the money?" She went back to her phone. "Talk to Mom." So I did. I walked into the living room and I set my phone down on the coffee table, opened to the insurance company's customer service page, and I asked my mother, flat out, what happened to the $175,000. She didn't look guilty. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look surprised. She looked annoyed. The same specific, particular annoyance she had always aimed at me when I asked questions she didn't want to answer. The annoyance of someone who has already decided they are right and finds any challenge to that decision personally offensive. "I borrowed it," she said. "I was going to pay it back." "You borrowed it. From me. My husband's life insurance. Without telling me. You were in no state to make financial decisions. That was money Jake left for me and for his daughter. And it is being managed responsibly, which is more than you would have done with it." "Where is it?" She waved her hand. "Invested." "In what? Real estate? A property? It's going to appreciate significantly." "In whose name?" She stood up. "And I want you to understand this moment. I want you to really see it." She stood up and she crossed her arms and she looked at me exactly the way she had always looked at me my entire life when she wanted me to feel small and unreasonable and ungrateful. That look. The one that says, "You are lucky I bother with you at all. You need to calm yourself down before we continue this conversation. Tell me whose name the property is in." And she said it. She said it like it was obvious. Like I should have already known. Like there was nothing wrong with it. "It's in my name. I used it for the down payment on the lake house I have been trying to buy for 15 years. You will be thanking me in 5 years when it's worth double what we paid. That was not your money. You are living in my house for free, Emma. I am your mother. This is what family does. We share resources." I never agreed to that. You were not capable of agreeing to anything in November. So you forged my signature on something? Her eyes went very cold, very flat. Watch what you accuse me of. Did you forge my name, or did you not? I had power of attorney. I stopped. Power of attorney? What power of attorney? I never signed a power of attorney. You signed a great many things in November, Emma. You have said yourself you don't remember half of what you signed. And here is the thing that hit me like ice water. She was not wrong. She was not wrong about that. I had signed so many things. 100 little pieces of paper, slid across a table with a sticky note. Sign here, and here, and here. I had not read a single one. Because I was grieving and exhausted, and she was my mother. I went upstairs. I put Lily in the crib. I sat on the edge of the bed and I called Aunt Renee back. I told her everything that had just been said, every word. And then Renee said, Emma, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen to me very carefully, okay? And what she told me in the next 10 minutes rewrote every understanding I had ever had about my family. This is what she does, Renee said. This is what she has always done. Do you know why your father really left? I had always believed my father left because he fell out of love with my mother. That was the story I had been told for 17 years. He left because she cleaned out their joint savings account before he even knew she wanted a divorce. Every penny. She retained a lawyer 9 months before she ever told your father she was unhappy. She planned the whole thing. He walked out with nothing. I could not speak. And Emma, she did the same thing to your grandmother's estate when your grandmother died. She was named executor. She skimmed from it for 2 years before anyone noticed. And what she did to me 11 years ago, that is why we don't talk. I couldn't prove it. The amount was smaller. I let it go because fighting her felt like it would cost me more than I lost. But she is not getting away with this. Not with you. Not with Jake's money. Not while that baby is involved. I said, Renee. She had power of attorney. There was a pause. Then the first question is whether that document is legitimate. And the second question, even if it is legitimate, is whether a power of attorney grants the right to redirect life insurance proceeds to oneself. Emma. It does not. That is not what a power of attorney does. That is self-dealing. That is fraud. She gave me a name, Derek Walsh. Family financial fraud cases were his specialty. She said, call him Monday morning. She said, stay in the house. Don't tip your hand. Act normal. Can you act normal, sweetheart? I looked at Lily in her crib. I said yes. That was Sunday. Monday morning, my mother woke me up and told me Lily's cough sounded rattly and that I should give her some Tylenol and stop being so dramatic about it. I drove us to the pediatrician at 9 a.m. Dr. Marin listened to Lily's chest for about 30 seconds and then said, I hear fluid. I want you to go to the ER. I called Derek Walsh from the hospital parking lot while Lily was getting a chest x-ray. He picked up on the second ring. I told him everything, all of it, in 11 minutes, barely stopping to breathe. He said, all right. Do not sign anything your mother puts in front of you. Do not confront her again. Call the insurance company one more time and request a complete copy of the claim file in writing. Request everything documented. I am going to start pulling records. He took the case. Lily had RSV and a beginning infection in her right lung. The ER doctor gave us a nebulizer prescription and a very specific set of instructions and told me she needed breathing treatments every 4 hours. That night, I came home with the nebulizer, and my mother stood in the hallway and said, see, she's fine. I told you it wasn't serious. I said, she has RSV and a lung infection. My mother sighed like I had said something exhausting. Tuesday morning, Lily spiked a fever of 103.4. She was inconsolable. I brought her downstairs and found my mother and Donna at the kitchen table. They had a laptop open between them. They closed it when I walked in, the same as they had done the night Jake died. I need help calling the nurse line, I said. The fever is 103.4. My mother barely looked up from her coffee. Babies run fevers, Emma. It's not a crisis every time. She's on a nebulizer. She has a respiratory illness. The ER told me to watch her temperature. You are catastrophizing. This is what you have always done. You make everything into an emergency. I called the nurse line myself. The nurse said to bring her in if it did not come down in an hour. It didn't. I started packing the diaper bag. My mother appeared in the doorway of my room. Emma. That flat voice. We need to have a conversation about your situation here. I kept packing. I have been patient. I have been accommodating. But if you are going to continue this behavior, continue to interrogate me and make accusations about finances I have been handling for your own benefit, then you cannot continue to stay in this house. I picked up the diaper bag. I picked up Lily. She was radiating heat. I'm taking her to urgent care. Emma, I mean it. If you walk out that door with this attitude, don't come back. I walked to the front door. She followed me. She was still talking. About ingratitude, about sacrifice, about how much she had done for me. About how I was exactly like my father. About how nobody appreciated what she gave to this family. I opened the front door. It was 28 degrees. The sleet was coming down in that particular way where it's not quite rain and not quite ice. Just cold needles hitting every exposed part of you. I stepped onto the porch. You walk away right now and I'm changing the locks. Mom, my baby is sick. You made your choices, Emma. And the door closed. The porch light clicked off. I stood there, soaked through my shirt in about 45 seconds. Lily screaming, me standing there in the dark, wet, holding everything I had in the world, trying to locate a single rational next thought. And then I heard her. Honey? Across the street, under her porch light, was Mrs. Elaine Calloway, 72 years old. She had lived in that house across from my mother since before I was born. She was already moving down her porch steps, already pulling a blanket off the back of her rocking chair, already waving me over with one hand. Come here. Right now, honey. Get out of that rain. Come on. I crossed the street. She wrapped the blanket around Lily and got us both inside, and she put the kettle on and she looked at me and she said, You sit right there and don't you move. Then she picked up her phone. She did not dial a friend. She did not call my mother. She dialed 911. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, in the most calm, composed, purposeful voice I have ever heard from a 72-year-old woman in a bathrobe, I am making sure this gets documented, sweetheart. I saw what just happened. I have been watching that woman for 30 years. This is getting documented. Officer Travis arrived in under 10 minutes. She was young, maybe 26, with a very calm manner and very attentive eyes that moved around the room taking everything in while she was still talking to you. She sat with me at Mrs. Calloway's kitchen table, and she took a full report. She looked at Lily's ER paperwork from the day before. She looked at the nebulizer prescription. She looked at the pediatrician notes from Monday. She was very thorough. She said, Is there a safe, warm place you and the baby can stay tonight? Mrs. Calloway said, She's staying here. Before I could answer. Officer Travis wrote everything down. She said, If you need that report number for any reason, here is the case number. She handed me a card. She looked at me for just a moment before she stood up, a specific kind of look that said she understood more than she was allowed to say in an official capacity. Then she left. Derek Walsh called that report the first domino. I want to stop here for a second because I need you to understand where I was emotionally. I slept in Mrs. Calloway's guest room that night with Lily in a pack-and-play she kept in the closet for her grandchildren. She made me tomato soup I didn't eat. She sat with me at midnight while I did Lily's breathing treatment, and she held my hand while the nebulizer hummed, and she said, I used to watch you from across the street when you were little. I always thought, that little girl deserves so much better. And I cried. Not the polite, quiet kind. The kind that has been building for months and comes out all at once, ugly and loud and completely beyond your control. The kind where you have to press a pillow over your face because the baby is finally asleep and you cannot wake her up. I cried for Jake. I cried for Lily not having a father. I cried for the mother I had convinced myself I had, but had never actually been given. I cried for the $175,000. I cried for every sticky note, every sign here. Every single moment I had trusted someone who was counting all along on the fact that I would. I cried until I was empty. And then I lay there in the dark, in the guest room of a neighbor's house with a humidifier running and Lily breathing steadily in the pack and play, and I made a decision. I was not going to survive this. I was going to win it. In the morning, Lily's fever had broken. She looked up at me from the pack and play and she grinned. She had just started doing that specific grin, the one with her whole face, the one that looked exactly like Jake. She grabbed my finger, and I looked at her and I thought, okay, let's go. I called Derek Walsh at 8 a.m. He already had a paralegal on the case. They had contacted the notary whose stamp appeared on the power of attorney document. Her name was Sandra Gibb. She lived 3 houses down from my mother on Birchwood Lane. She was not a neutral professional notary. She was my mother's neighbor of 12 years. And when Derek's office requested a copy of her official notarial log from the period in question, Sandra's log did not contain any entry corresponding to the date on the power of attorney document. Let me say that again, because I want it to be very clear. The notary stamp on the document my mother had been presenting as a legal power of attorney did not appear in the notary's official record, which meant it had either been forged entirely or the notary had performed the notarization informally and off-book, which is its own category of serious professional and legal violation. Either way, the document was fraudulent, and everything my mother had done under its authority, including signing for my mail, presenting herself to the insurance company as my representative, and endorsing and depositing a $175,000 check made out to me, had been done without any legal basis whatsoever. Here is where the second layer of this opened up. Derek's paralegal was reviewing the insurance company's records from November, the 3 calls my mother had made, the representations she had made to the company, the information she had provided. And buried in those records was something that made my blood run cold when Derek read it to me over the phone. One of the calls in November had not come from my mother. It had come from Donna. My sister Donna had called the insurance company from her own cell phone on November 9th and had spoken to a representative while identifying herself as a family representative assisting the beneficiary. She had confirmed in that call the mailing address for the check. She had given my mother's address. Not my address, not some shared address. She had specifically provided my mother's home address so that the check would go directly to my mother instead of to me. Donna knew. She had known from the beginning. That conversation at the kitchen table the night Jake died. The laptop they closed when I walked in. My mother and my sister had been sitting there planning how to intercept my husband's life insurance money before I even knew the man was gone. I had to sit with that. I had to sit with it for a very long time. And I am not going to tell you it was easy. I am going to tell you it was one of the hardest things I have ever done, holding that knowledge in my chest and not saying a word while I figured out what I was going to do about it. Derek filed the civil lawsuit in January. The claims were conversion of funds, breach of fiduciary duty under an invalid power of attorney, and unjust enrichment. He also filed a formal complaint with the state agency overseeing notarial commissions against Sandra Gibb, and he filed what he described as a courtesy notice with the DA's office. He told me what that meant in plain terms. He said, "It means I am formally making the district attorney aware that there is evidence of potential felony conduct in this matter. It doesn't start a criminal prosecution automatically, but it puts them on notice and it opens a door." Then Derek asked me whether I knew exactly what my mother had done with the money. I told him what she said, that she used it for a down payment on the lake house. And that is when we found out the full scope of what she had done. The investigation revealed that my mother had spent $95,000 of the $175,000 as a down payment on a lake property she titled entirely in her own name. She had spent $38,000 paying off her personal credit card debt. She had spent $12,000 on renovations to her primary residence. The remaining $30,000 was sitting in her personal checking account, mixed in with her own money like it had always belonged there. Every penny of it. Every dollar Jake ever made. Money he planned for his daughter's future. My mother's personal credit card debt. Her renovations. Her lake house. I had 2 weeks where I could barely function. I won't dress that up. Mrs. Calloway let us stay with her for 3 weeks, and I used that time to do 3 things. I documented every conversation I could remember having with my mother about finances, every date and time I could reconstruct from my phone history and email, every detail of every interaction I could recall from November and December. I called Jake's employer HR and obtained a certified copy of the life insurance beneficiary designation he had updated after Lily was born. And I found a therapist who had a sliding scale fee because I knew I could not fight this battle on empty. I know that sounds simple. It was not simple, but it was necessary. Derek filed for a temporary restraining order on the lake house in February. This meant that while the lawsuit was pending, my mother could not sell it, transfer it, refinance it, or move money out of it in any form. She received that legal notice on a Tuesday. Her neighbor, not Sandra Gibb, a different neighbor, called Renee to tell her that she had heard Patricia screaming inside the house so loud it carried through the walls. I will be honest with you. That gave me a very specific feeling that I am not proud of, but I am also not going to pretend I did not have. Donna called me the same afternoon. It was the first time I had heard from her since the porch. "You need to stop this," she said. "Do you have any idea what you are doing to this family?" I let her talk. I had my second phone, the prepaid one Derek told me to get. I was recording. "Mom has high blood pressure. She has serious anxiety. You are making her sick. Is that what you want? To make your own mother sick? Donna, where is my money? It's in a property that is going to appreciate. This is not the way to handle a family dispute." Donna, you called the insurance company in November. You redirected the mailing address. I have the call records. Silence. The specific kind of silence that is not confusion. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you should talk to a lawyer. I hung up. Derek told me not to engage further. I listened. From that point, I did not take another call from Donna or my mother. Derek's office handled all contact. The notary commission investigation came back in March. Sandra Gibbs' log had no entry for the power of attorney document. Not a missing page. Not a smudged date. No entry. The document could not be authenticated as a legitimately commissioned notarization. Derek filed an amended complaint against my mother that added language explicitly referencing the possibility of criminal fraud. He also did something I had not anticipated. He contacted my mother's mortgage lender directly. He informed them that a civil lawsuit had been filed challenging the source of funds used as the down payment on their mortgaged property. The lender launched their own internal review. And what the lender found is where the third and final wall came down on my mother. In the mortgage application, my mother had listed the $95,000 down payment as personal savings. She had not disclosed that the funds were from a recently deceased person's insurance policy. She had not disclosed that the funds were under dispute. She had not disclosed the lawsuit. Under federal mortgage application law, that is material misrepresentation. That is mortgage fraud. And that is a federal-level issue that my mother had walked herself directly into while she was busy stealing from me. I want to be very precise here about something. I did not set any of these things in motion wanting to destroy my mother. I set them in motion wanting my husband's money back for my daughter. Everything else that happened was the natural consequence of how far my mother had gone and how many lies she had needed to tell to cover what she had done. She did not get buried by my revenge. She got buried by her own choices. I was just the person who stopped pretending they weren't happening. April. My mother threw herself a birthday party. This is the most Patricia thing I can possibly describe. And if you have ever had a Patricia in your life, you will understand instantly what I mean. She invited approximately 40 people to her house, catered food, a cake she had specially ordered. She even had Donna send out printed invitations. Because in Patricia's world, none of this was happening. The lawsuit was a temporary inconvenience, a minor misunderstanding between an ungrateful daughter and a generous mother. Not a thing that was actually going to touch her life. The party was proof that she still felt completely untouchable. Donna's husband Mark called Aunt Renee and asked if she was planning to come and make peace. Renee told him she would think about it. Then she called me, and she said, "You know what I think you should do? I want to be very clear. I did not go to my mother's birthday party to cause a scene. That is not what this was. Derek had informed me that I had legal standing to retrieve my personal property from the house, that I had never formally vacated the premises, and that my mother's unilateral declaration that I should not come back did not constitute a legal eviction, and that going with a witness in a documented environment to collect my belongings was the appropriate move. He arranged for a sheriff's deputy to accompany me. That was what was happening. The 40 birthday guests were just the audience that happened to be assembled when it did. I arrived at 4:15 in the afternoon. Deputy Brantley, a tall, quiet man with an expression that suggested he had seen all possible versions of this situation at least once before, knocked on the door with me standing beside him. Lily on my hip. Aunt Renee 2 steps behind me. Donna opened the door. And the look on her face. I would pay money to have a photograph of that look. It went through shock, guilt, fear, calculation, more fear, and then settled into the manufactured offense that is the one expression every person who grew up watching a master manipulator knows how to put on like a mask. "What is this?" she said. "Why is there an officer here?" "I am here to retrieve my personal property," I said. "I have documentation." "Mom!" she called over her shoulder. "Mom, you need to come here right now." The party sound stopped, not all at once. In that rippling way where one person stops talking, and then the person next to them notices something is happening, and then the quiet spreads through the room like a wave. People drifted toward the hallway, cousins I had not seen in years, my mother's book club, her neighbors, and Sandra Gibb, who was standing toward the back near the kitchen door. When Sandra saw me, she went the color of old chalk. She put down her drink. She took 1 step backward toward the kitchen, and she did not look at me again. My mother came into the hallway. She had a new dress on. Her hair was done beautifully. She had a champagne flute in her right hand, and her chin was slightly elevated in that way she always held herself at her own events. The queen of her own world. She looked at me, then at Deputy Brantley, then at Renee. The champagne flute started to vibrate, very slightly, just enough for me to see it. "Emma," she said, "this is not appropriate." "Patricia," the deputy said professionally and without any inflection at all, "your daughter is here to retrieve personal property from the premises. She has not formally vacated. This will take approximately 30 minutes. You're welcome to continue your gathering." "I want her out of my house." "Ma'am, she has legal standing to be here today. You're welcome to contact your attorney if you have questions." My mother looked at the 40 people watching her from the living room and the hallway. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother calculate whether a scene was worth it and decide it was not. "Fine," she said. "Get your things." I went upstairs. I took 38 minutes. I took Jake's photographs from the dresser. I took Lily's birth certificate and social security card and every medical record I had stored in the room. I took the complete file of documents I had found in my mother's home office 3 weeks earlier during a moment when I was home alone. I had found that file. I had photographed every single document inside it on my second phone, and I had left them exactly where they were. The originals were now coming with me. Derek was going to be very pleased, because inside that file was the insurance check stub, showing the check number, the amount, and the deposit date. Inside that file were my mother's handwritten financial spreadsheets showing where the money had gone. And inside that file were printed copies of Donna's email to my mother from November 7th, 2 days before Donna called the insurance company, laying out the plan in writing, the mailing address they needed to confirm, the timeline for when the check would arrive, the fact that I would probably not question it for weeks given the state she's in Donna's own words, in an email, printed out and filed by my mother, who apparently never considered that paper trails work in every direction. I came downstairs with 2 bags and a box. 40 people were still standing there. Nobody had left. Nobody was talking. My mother was at the bottom of the stairs, and she tried one last time. She used the voice, the quiet, controlled one, the one that was designed specifically to make me feel small. "Are you satisfied?" she said. "Are you happy with what you're doing to this family? What you're putting me through?" I had thought about this moment for months. I had rehearsed speeches. I had written out long, devastating lists of every true thing I could say. I could have stood in that hallway and told 40 witnesses everything. Every dollar, every lie, every sticky note. Sandra Gibbs standing in the back near the kitchen door. Donna in the doorway to the living room. I could have burned it all down right there. But Mrs. Calloway had told me, "Don't give her the satisfaction of losing your dignity, baby." And Derek had told me not to engage. And Renee had told me to let the process do the work. So I looked at my mother and I said very quietly, "I'm going to go take care of my daughter now." I walked out the door. Lily grabbed a fistful of my hair as I went down the porch steps. Renee was right behind me. Deputy Brantley carried the box. We put everything in my car and we drove away. I did not look back. What I couldn't see from the car, and what Renee's contact relayed to her in detail later that evening, was what happened the second my taillights disappeared around the corner. My mother turned back to her guests with that smile she keeps in reserve for exactly this kind of moment, and began to say something about how difficult I had always been. She got approximately 4 words in, and then Sandra Gibb very quietly excused herself, retrieved her purse from the coat rack, and left the party without saying goodbye. My mother finished her sentence. By the next morning, Sandra had retained an attorney. She was already working to get ahead of the notary commission complaint. By noon, my mother had figured out what Sandra's early departure meant. That is when she called Derek's office and told his receptionist that she would be filing a defamation lawsuit if this nonsense did not immediately stop. Derek relayed this to me. He sounded the way a person sounds when they are suppressing a laugh for professional reasons. "She is welcome to file whatever she chooses," he said. "The documents will speak for themselves." In May, the DA's office opened a formal investigation. In June, my mother's mortgage lender froze the lake house account pending the fraud review. In July, Donna was called in for a deposition. I was not in that room, but Derek was, and he is very thorough. He told me afterward that Donna's composure lasted approximately 11 minutes. Then she started crying. She confirmed that she had called the insurance company. She confirmed that she had redirected the mailing address. She confirmed that she had known in advance what her mother intended to do with the money. She tried to characterize it as a family loan everyone had verbally agreed to. Derek asked her to produce any written record of my agreement to this loan. She could not, because there was no record, because I had never agreed, because nobody had ever asked me, because the agreement had only ever existed in the story they told themselves to make what they did feel acceptable. After the deposition, the tone of the opposing counsel's communications changed dramatically. Within 3 weeks, we went from aggressive counter-threats to what Derek described as a marked interest in exploring resolution. My mother's attorney was having some very honest conversations with his client about the cumulative exposure she was facing, the civil judgment, the fraudulent POA findings, the notary investigation and Gibbs' cooperation, the DA's open criminal review, the federal mortgage fraud question. My mother had walked into all of this thinking I was too broken to fight. She had not accounted for Renee. She had not accounted for Derek. She had not accounted for Mrs. Calloway and her 911 call and Officer Travis's meticulous documentation. She had not accounted for Donna's email. She had not accounted for the fact that she had filed her own evidence in a box in her home office. She had not accounted for the fact that I was 28 years old with a daughter who had Jake's eyes, and I had decided I was going to win. Settlement talks began in August. The agreement was finalized in September. I will tell you what I can tell you. The full $175,000 came back. Every dollar, with interest calculated from the date it was taken. Legal fees were covered by my mother as part of the agreement. Consequential damages for the period I was displaced from housing with a medically compromised infant were included. Donna paid a separate smaller amount as part of her own settlement. The lake house was sold to satisfy the total judgment, because my mother did not have the cash to pay it any other way. The lake house she spent 15 years dreaming about, the one she bought with Jake's money, the one she told me I would be thanking her for in 5 years. It is now someone else's property. It cost her everything she thought she was protecting. Sandra Gibbs surrendered her notary commission and settled a separate civil liability claim. The DA's investigation remained open at the time of the settlement, and I was specifically not party to any decisions about that process. That was between my mother and the district attorney. I had my answer. I had my money. I had my daughter. That was enough. My mother sent me a letter in October, handwritten. I want to tell you it was an apology. It was not. It was a 4-page explanation of why everything she had done was justified, why she had always acted in my best interest, why I had misunderstood her intentions, and why, when I was older and wiser, I would understand. It was the most Patricia document I have ever read in my life. I scanned it. I sent it to Derek. And then I walked to the kitchen trash can and I dropped it in. I did not feel anything in particular when I did it. Not anger, not satisfaction, not grief. Just a very quiet sense of completion. Like closing a book you never really wanted to read but needed to finish. Donna and I have not spoken since the deposition. I have no specific feeling about that either, which is, I think, its own kind of grief and its own kind of peace at the same time. I am still working on understanding it. Mrs. Calloway came to Lily's first birthday party. She brought a stuffed elephant. Lily immediately tried to eat it. Mrs. Calloway sat at my kitchen table in our new apartment, small but entirely ours, and she drank tea and watched Lily work on her birthday cake, and she said, "She looks like her daddy." She does. She really does. Those eyes, every single morning. Here is the thing I want to leave you with, not about the settlement. Not about the lake house or the legal fees or the documents or the DA, about the porch, that specific exact moment. 28 degrees, sleet. Lily burning with fever against my chest. The porch light clicking off. Because in that moment, I felt what I can only describe as the specific despair of a person who has run out of road, who has been failed, completely and without apology, by the person who was supposed to be the last resort when everything else fails. I had nothing. I had a sick baby and a wet diaper bag and whatever money was in my wallet, which was $43. And I want you to hear this part very clearly. The road was not actually out. The road was hidden. Mrs. Calloway was across the street with a blanket. Aunt Renee was one phone call away. Derek Walsh existed, and he picked up on the second ring. Officer Travis wrote everything down and gave me a case number. The insurance company had records. Donna had sent an email. My mother had filed it in a box, and my daughter grabbed my finger at 6 in the morning and reminded me what I was doing this for. The people who use your vulnerability against you are always, always betting that you are too damaged to fight back. They are counting on your grief, your exhaustion, your love for them, your need for them to be better than they are. My mother counted on all of those things. She had been counting on them, in one person or another, for 30 years. She was wrong about me. And the thing that ended her was not my anger. It was my patience. It was the second phone. It was the documents I photographed and left in place. It was the deposition she never saw coming because she assumed I was too broken to prepare for one. It was the email Donna sent my mother in November that Donna forgot she had put in writing. Greed makes people careless. Arrogance makes people careless. And when you are patient and quiet and very, very thorough, that carelessness becomes the whole case. Lily just turned 1. We have our apartment. I have a portion of Jake's insurance in a college fund in Lily's name. A portion in an emergency account that only I have access to. A portion I am using to get my life built into something sturdy. Every single morning I get her up and she grins at me with her whole face and her 2 little teeth and her eyes that look exactly like her father's. And I think about that porch. I think about the door closing. I think about what it cost the woman who closed it. And I think about what that door closing gave me, which was the only thing I ever actually needed, the absolute, final, undeniable proof that I was on my own, and that being on your own, when you have the right people in your corner, is not the end of anything. It is the exact beginning of everything. If any part of this story sounds like your life right now, I am talking to you directly. You are not out of road. The road is just hidden. Start looking, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you know what to do, because we are not done here, not even close.